Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. And I alluded to this in the prior video that this is a tricky verse. There's a lot going on. So what we're going to do first is take a look at the Greek, which is hard enough on its own. It's harder than average based on what we've seen thus far. And then if you want to continue, we'll take a look at how it compares with the Hebrew and make some observations, some other fun stuff as well. So let's dig in. Uk, eon, orthos, proseninkes, orthos de me dielthes, hemartes. Notice there's a question there. Hesukasan, prase, apostrophe, altu, kaisu, arxes, altu. Well, to make any sense of this, we're going to have to start with this uk. And remember in verse 4:6, we saw that this is God speaking to Cain, and now he's going to continue. So we start with a negation, immediately followed by a subclause here. So we're going to have to skip over that and jump ahead to this verb, hemartes. This is from hamartano, and you can probably guess that there's a sinful kind of thing under the hood here. And this is, in fact, is the verb for to sin. And with that ending and a lengthening on the front end, this is a second singular aorist active indicative. And so the basic framing is, have you not sinned, question mark. Now let's find out what the kind of situation is between those two bookends. So we begin with aeon, if, and if here, this form of aeon is going to take the subjunctive, as we'll see. But first we have orthos, and this means rightly. And that's where we get like the orthos, like orthodox or something like that. And then our verb here is proseninkes. And we've seen that verb before. It's built off of pharaoh, which pivots to this enink kind of thing. And with that lengthening of the connecting vowel here and absence of a past time indicator, even though with the spelling change we know this is an aorist, this happens to be a second singular aorist active subjunctive because of the aeon. And this is to offer up. So this would be you offered or offered up or brought forth an offering, something like that. So something like, if you rightly offer up. And then we continue with another orthos, rightly again. But here we have the contrast, de me, but you do not dielthes. And this is from diireo, which means to divide. And with that lengthening of the connecting vowel again, and some other stuff going on with the spelling change of ireo, this is also a second singular aorist active subjunctive. Both are subjunctive, piggybacking off of this aeon. So if you rightly offer up, but do not rightly divide with respect to the sacrifice that you've made, then we go back and say, have you not sinned? That's the basic idea. So syntactically, it's a little bit tricky here, but when you step back, I think the basic sense is clear. And then we have a command, hesukasan. This is from hesukazo. It's a second singular aorist active imperative here with that san ending. And this means to be silent, to chill out, be calm, etc. Then we have prase, to you, he apostrophe. There's some debate on what this exactly means. Technically, it means just something like return. It could be recourse. And it's autu, it's his. Who's that referring to? Well, maybe to Abel, maybe to sin. It's not technically clear in the Greek. Then last we have and, you. Arxes here is from archo with that, it's essentially an embedded sigma here due to the square of stop, second singular ending. This is a second singular future active indicative. Some sort of recourse is coming towards you, and you will rule over it. So autu here in the genitive is the direct object of archo. You might have expected an accusative, but here it's a genitive, which is one of the options for archo. And so a lot of weird stuff going on here. And that's going to be very unfamiliar if you're used to the Hebrew. So let's clean things up a bit. I'm just going to give you the translation from the Lexham English Septuagint. You've seen that on the screen. And I've talked about this before. I'm going to have a whole video dedicated to English translations of the Septuagint. Here's how they render the Septuagint, which is pretty close to what we got to. Have you not sinned? There's that uk, hemartes. If you offer rightly, that is a sacrifice, but do not divide rightly. Calm down. That's kind of a funny gloss. His recourse, notice it is ambiguous. Who's that referring to? Is that sin? Is that Abel? What have you? Will be to you, and you will rule him. Notice they've definitely taken this as a person as opposed to maybe an it. But that's an interpretive decision that they've made as they're translating the interpretive decision that the Greek translator has made. So a lot of things going on. Well, this is odd because it's very, very different than what you might be used to from this verse. So I'm just going to show you the Christian Standard Bible that is from the Masoretic as opposed to the Septuagint. And this might ring a bell. You're going to see something similar in the NIV, ESV, and so forth. If you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. And so we do see this sense of a contrast that you got the if, and if you do one thing, blah, blah, blah. If you do the other thing, some other option. But the Septuagint obviously has made a very different take on this. And this idea of sin crouching at the door is not picked up at all, really. Here, sin is the problem that is going to continue antagonizing Cain here. You don't really get that impression at all from the Septuagint interpretation. They mainly focus on whether his sacrifice has been rightly done or incorrectly done. Sin isn't mentioned. It's this ambiguous he or it, whereas the Masoretic has a much clearer stance on it. Notice we have its desire, and there's some debate on how exactly to translate that, but referring to sin as opposed to the apostrophe there, which is very ambiguous in the Greek, its desire is for you. You see this antagonism between man and sin, but you must rule. You will mashal over it. Or some will say, perhaps you can rule, or you need to try to rule. There's actually a fair amount of debate about how exactly to take that Hebrew verb. You'll notice there is a substantial difference at the end of the day between the Greek translator and the original Hebrew, assuming that the Masoretic is pretty close to what the Septuagint translators were operating from, which I don't have any reason to doubt that. And so this is one of the first times I think we've seen thus far in our study of Genesis where there's a lot of liberty being taken, where the translation is not really kind of spot on. Typically, the Genesis translator is quite word for word and tends to keep it in the fairway in terms of the sense. But this is one situation where it goes very NLT or very the message, not to, I'm not trying to sort of make a value judgment on those translations, but they tend to be a bit more interpretive, more expansive or what have you, and clearly the Septuagint translator has done something like that here. It's difficult to explain why exactly that it is, a lot of interpretive license. Now, if you know some of your American literature, I am a big fan of Steinbeck, and quite famously, one of his major novels, East of Eden, is really an elaboration on the Cain and Abel story. Even the names of the characters are echoes of that. And a big part of the plot is driven precisely by, oddly enough, he was a well-read man, the Hebrew of must rule, which is Tim Shell. So he gets into the ins and outs of all of this and plays it out with the story of these two characters in East of Eden. Of course, East of Eden itself is a play on how they're outside of Eden and kicked out due to Adam and Eve's sin. So if you've never read it before, highly recommend it. It's a tricky novel, quite thick, but incidentally, it is a massive reflection and a fictional story based on essentially Genesis 4, 1 through 7, and oddly enough, picks up on this whole verb sense. And in fact, gets into a lot of debate about what exactly that verb means. So, anyway, fun stuff. A lot of open-ended questions here about the translation, but hopefully this has been enjoyable.